I'm delighted to be joined by a pioneer of women's MMA, Liz, the Goldrilla Carmouche, who's going to be facing the undefeated flyweight champion, Juliana Velasquez, in the upcoming headlining title bout at Bellator 278 on April 22nd this year. So, Liz, it's a pleasure to have you with us. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great, thank you.
Great. You have great momentum going behind you. You're on a 3-fight win streak. You're coming off an impressive fourth-round knockout. How do you feel going into this fight? And does that undefeated part have any mental role or challenges that they present to you?
No, the undefeated part has no. I mean, if anything, the Watanabe fight should have showed exactly what I think about an undefeated record, and it just needs to be changed. That 0 needs to be 1, right? I'm super prepared for this fight. I've been studying Juliana since Alima fought her. So in anticipation of that fight, I've been mimicking her, studying all of her strengths and weaknesses. And then, of course, when she took the belt, then it was even on stronger to make sure that I studied and tried to pick her apart and see where her weaknesses were. And I feel like I've done that. Like each fight that I've seen of hers has only prepared me even more for the 22nd. And then I've also been in anticipation of this fight since September, hoping to fight in December. So I have almost 8 months of training going into this fight.
Oh, wow. So it sounds like you have a lot of preparation going into it. So I wanted to ask you, say you won the title. So what would your next plan be? Are you looking at an immediate rematch with Velasquez, or will we finally get this dream fight against your teammate, Alima Lay McFarlane?
I think neither. I love the idea of, instead of rematches, is trying to take on somebody else. And so winning that belt, I'd like to do, hopefully, if Bellator and COVID would allow, to go to another country, have an opportunity to see somewhere different and to compete against a different opponent. One of the things that I really want to be able to do in Bellator with the belt is 2 things. I want to open up the 135 division by first taking the 125 belt. And then after that, I want to take Bellator to Japan and fight in either mainland Japan or in Okinawa.
Okinawa, of course, because that's where you grew up. So you want to go back home and bring everyone with you as a champion. That sounds like an amazing plan.
Yeah.
So that leads me to my next question. You fought with some incredible talent, including Valentina Shevchenko, Ronda Rousey, and you've also fought with some great athletes on the same card. Is there any single one that stands out the most to you?
I would say the 2 fights that stand out the most to me is the Marlos Conan fight. For one, I just had so much respect for Marlos. The speech and everything that she gave me post-fight about my performance, how I presented myself, it meant the world to me at that time as an up-and-comer, having very little training going into that fight. And one thing that showed me is, having very little training, I still had the heart to go through and to put on the best performance and do as well as I should. So that fight meant the world to me, because I really, again, still like her as a person. And everything that she had to say to me helped motivate me to continue on and to have more drive in what I was doing. And then this last fight with Watanabe, I think so many people had a lot more enthusiasm for Watanabe and what she had to offer. And in anticipation of her flawless record, they thought that she was going to come out with another win over me and make her name in Bellator. And so for me to go out there and finish her so strongly and so fast really made a statement in Bellator, and I think in women's MMA. So those 2 fights are really the 2 that stand out strongest for me.
Yeah, first round, first minute, and that was incredible. Your last performance. So you're, of course, one of the pioneers of the sport, especially for women in MMA. I want to ask you, how do you see the sport has evolved from the start, and what was it like in the beginning?
This sport for women has evolved so much. When I started off, there was very few gyms that allowed women to train there, and even fewer that actually had women that were training there. And if you wanted to step into a gym and see that women were the top talent that were in there, it didn't exist at that time. It was very hard to get a professional amateur fight. It was very hard to get a fight to be on anything less than the prelims. Like you're lucky if you got on the prelim cards and anybody even knew your name going into it. Now you fast forward to now, when women are headlining fights, where people are tuning in for the fights, where we have organizations like Invicta where it's all women fighting. That's so different. And it's amazing to go into gym now and see that almost every gym that you go into has a woman that's on that team, if not some of the top talent that's in that room.
Wow. Yeah, because you saw it all. You literally went through it all and experienced it firsthand. So talk to us more about your first day of training. You touched on the topic just a little while ago when you were saying that you were still early in your training and you came out of the military, I believe, That's when you started training, and you forged at the gym when you were sparring, you broke your nose, how that made you fall in love with the sport?
Yeah, I had that stubborn mentality of every Marine that just does what they're told and just goes in there and just grinds through when I first went in there. And thankfully that carried me through because I had not an idea of what I was doing. I just had the heart, I had the discipline, and I was just a dumb Marine, just going in there and giving everything I had. But I had a heart and I had a love for the sport that happened immediately. And that carried through my career, even when at that time there wasn't a lot of opportunities for women. And certainly when you're getting paid, I mean, my first fight, I think I was paid 100 and 100 to fight. So and I think we had to negotiate to get the $100 bonus for winning the fight. So
Oh,
that's just how little women were making. And then you take my counterpart as a male, him entering in, and he's making 1,000. So that just shows the discrepancies that even still occur today. But certainly was just something where if you were a woman, you were fighting not because you're in it for the money, you're in it for the fame, you were just doing it because you loved it. And that really was so many years of my career was just doing it because I love it, and it still is today. But that certainly is what started it.
yeah, you're of course someone who loves challenges. You're a person who seeks challenges, and we can all see that in your personality. You know, you of course the first ever female fight was with you, so that's incredible in the UFC. I mean, of course. Um, so you're also someone who's very analytical. We see you talking about your performances and saying how you need to improve areas that you may feel like are your weaknesses, and then you strengthen them. I want to ask you, how do you see your game has evolved over the last few years, and where do you think you personally are going to take it ahead?
Yeah, I think that my game has evolved substantially over the last few years, in part because I started to put my career selfishly in the forefront of what I was doing in my life. And so I was able to start devoting my time to my evolution and everything that would do to do that, including things like traveling to different trainers that maybe I wouldn't have done in the past, whether it was that it was just couldn't afford to do the travel, or I couldn't afford to pay that trainer. And now it's more important to me, my growth. And even if that means the initial investment is in a debt and in a deficit, I know that it'll be off because of the fight. And those are things I've put ahead and have allowed me to continue to succeed, is always that evolution. And I've been able to work with some different coaches that they have that same hunger of evolution and
Yeah.
growth. And so every time that they come in, it's about incorporating new things, learning new things. They're constantly studying, and having coaches that have that same mentality feeds you and lights a fire for you to learn more, and just helps encourage everything that we're trying to do here.
Yeah, it's crazy, especially because the sport is so young. The game evolves so quickly. From like, it's crazy to think about someone who competed and were great 10 years ago, how they would fare against today, right? And then we have someone like you who's stayed right in there, right? Like in the top of the pound for pound rankings and still going strong. So you're an inspiration, right, to females, to the LGBT community, to veterans, and many young girls look up to you. How does it feel like to be in that position, and how do you deal with the pressures that come along with it?
It's crazy to think that I'm in that position at all. I mean, when I was a young Marine, I was just trying to survive. I was just trying to do my job and not get in trouble all the time, because I was a horrible electrician and constantly accidentally breaking stuff. So I was to try and go day to day without getting yelled at. And then to go in and start off in a gym where I was one of the only women that was on the team, and certainly one of the only ones that went pro and succeeded, to pave the way in any way for anybody else. I was in during Don't Ask, Don't Tell, so there weren't other examples to me that I knew firsthand that were a part of the LGBT community. So to be where I am today is crazy, because if you had asked me 10 years ago if that's who I thought I'd be, the answer would have easily been no. I never would have thought that I would stand out amongst anyone.
But that's crazy. Your military time, the time that you spend there, has a lot to do with the person you are today, where you make it a point that you are going to speak out. You're not going to hide who you are as an individual. Um, Take us back into your time with the military, you know, the lessons that you learned, the challenges that you faced, and of course, you've touched on the homophobia that you had to experience during that time.
Yeah, like I said, I was in during Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And unfortunately, in many aspects of my life, and like you see my career now too, I'm a late bloomer through and through. And so I wasn't one of those fortunate people that knew who they were in high school or in middle school. I really didn't start to figure that out until when I was adult and in the Marine Corps. But it was in during Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And at that time, not only was it Don't Ask, Don't Tell, but the unit in particular I was with, if they suspected that you were homosexual, they were trying to get you kicked out of the military. And to get kicked out of the military ruins the rest of your life. That's you get an honorable discharge. You can't get regular jobs. You miss out on so many different opportunities. And so the possibility of being open wasn't even a thought in my head, because the last thing I wanted to do was get kicked out of the military. I wanted to leave it honorably. And so to think that that could possibly happen was a scary thought. But it also helped shape me in understanding that having hid in the closet and being worried about something like that, that it wasn't something I was willing to do once I did get out.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So I feel like you have gone through these tremendous challenges, experiences. What's your relationship like with God? Because that has to be affected by all these things, right? Your faith has to be. Yeah, I'll let you explain on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Growing up, I went to a Christian school, and it was incorporated from all the way from kindergarten through high school. And so having been in that environment and grown up in strong spirituality, it was really difficult when I have my peers, I have teachers that are telling me I'm going to go to hell for being homosexual. And when you factor in how good of a kid I wasn't out, I wasn't having sex, I wasn't doing drugs, I wasn't out doing anything bad. And here I am seemingly shining out differently from my peers and being told I'm going to go to hell when, for all intents and purposes, I was a good kid. So it definitely swayed and had a hard relationship with Christianity, but it again just made me understand that there's a difference between organized religion and spirituality, and to identify differently than how other people were. I just had to find my own path when it came to spirituality and religion.
Right, and you paved the path for many others along the way. So another question that I have been meaning to ask you related to all of this is, how has your faith changed after nearly surviving death multiple times? You've talked about the IED explosions near you, which happened 3 or 4 times. Like, I imagine that has to change the person you are. So how did that change your relationship with God?
Yeah, it just made me realize through all this adversity, all these close calls, all these experiences, that I can try and take my path and I can try and shape it and direct it. But ultimately, it's meant to go where it's supposed to. And it just made me just have a belief in that I can just try and be the best version on that path, but the path is set and it's going to follow whatever road it's meant to go down.
Wow, that's a very beautiful way to put it. Wow. Um, so I saw your Insta story earlier today. Your wife Berlin got you guys a new dog. Did you name her yet?
No, thankfully she did not get us a new dog.
Oh,
She trains dogs for a living.
oh, yeah.
2 weeks ago, had an emergency heart surgery and had to have a pacemaker replaced.
Yeah.
And so she had said in her road to recovery, she's not supposed to be training any more dogs. So it came as a surprise that there's a new dog in for training that's not supposed to be there.
Gotcha. And how's the recovery going for her coming off? I heard it was an emergency surgery, the
Yes.
heart one, yeah.
Yeah, she had heart disease, and she's had a pacemaker installed for a few years. It's supposed to last, we want to say, for about 5 to 6 more years. And we started to notice some irregularities that were going on, and it failed, it turned out. Thankfully, pushed her. She went into the ER. They ran some tests, and instead of it just being tests to see what was going on, they immediately rushed her into surgery to have the pacemaker replaced. Prior to that, she had a lot of lack of range of motion, a lot of pain, a lot of all these, she was getting migraines as a result, it turned out, from the pacemaker. And so this replacement has actually given her more range of motion. And while it's been an unexpected recovery, it's going a lot smoother than the surgeries in the past have.
Oh, that's good to hear that it's a smoother recovery and she got the right treatment at the right time, because with those things, it can be very challenging emotionally. So how is your son Brant doing? Being in that house with painting goats, all these other crazy animals.
He loves it. He loves all the animals. I mean, my wife had gotten him a pony a while ago, and so he has his own responsibilities there, and he loves learning, and he tries to follow her around, learning how to do dog training. He loves that we have animals. If anything, I'm having to tell both of them to stop bringing animals home, because that's what they're constantly trying to do.
So I wanted to touch a hot topic recently. What are your thoughts on transgender athletes competing with women in sports now?
This is something I've talked on before. I'm in no way opposed to transgender athletes, just in the same way that I'm not opposed to athletes that choose to do drugs and steroids. I think there should be organizations and platforms for them to do that. If somebody wants to, we should have a drug-free environment, and we should have a separation between men and women. there is a reason that we have different weight divisions, because there's a discrepancy in weight. And there's a reason that right now men and women aren't allowed to compete against each other. And I think in that same sense that transgender athletes should be allowed to compete, but it should be in a platform just for themselves. So it's a fair platform for everybody.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of people would agree to that, and research suggests the same thing, that, yeah, I agree with that. If they had their own kind of competition, that would make things more fair, especially for women now. So let's talk about your CBD work. I know you're a spokesperson for Medical Marijuana Inc., and you have a sponsorship with a CBD coffee company. So what are its therapeutic benefits for athletes, Les?
One of the big takeaways that I take from CBD is the reduction of inflammation, especially combat athlete. And having been in the Marine Corps, inflammation is usually something that plagues our body. And while I do a really good job with my diet and trying to reduce the amount of inflammatory foods that I ingest, it's a combat sport. We're banging up our bodies. Inflammation is unavoidable. But taking something like CBD helps with anxiety, it helps me sleep, and it helps remove all the aches and pains that I have without having to put something in my body that has tons of side effects. So I'm a big person that believes in the use of CBD, and for the people that want to use it, THC as well.
Oh, okay. So we are very close to the fight. It's about 2 weeks away. I want to ask you something. Do you still play zombie shoot 'em up games during fight week?
No, unfortunately, I broke my PS3, and so as a result, I'm taking it to fights. Usually, it's just a matter of just kind of I do a lot of reading. If I have games on my phone, and mostly a lot of reading and just watching food TV shows. Like,
Yeah.
stop on Instagram looking at food, dreaming about the foods I'm going to eat, trying to plan out my foodie adventures post-fight.
So what's your post-fight meal that you've planned for yourself after the event?
So they're talking about this venue being actually an earlier fight than usual than what we're used to. I'm used to getting my fights at like 11 or 12. So doing post-fight fun meals just hasn't been happening. But it looks like I should be out before 9 p.m. And if that's the case, I really want to get a Wagyu steak and then ube desserts.
Oh, and then what?
Ube desserts.
Oh, okay, damn. That sounds really good. What do you like to do in your free time that makes you happy?
I mean, most of my time is spent training in MMA. Now I've been fortunate enough to be able to actually watch my son train jiu-jitsu. He does gi jiu-jitsu. And so for just with my training at the gym as well as my teaching at the gym, now I'm no longer involved with any gym whatsoever besides my own personal training. So I have the free time now to actually go watch him, and that's been great. And then watching my wife's enthusiasm with horses and getting to see both of them ride has honestly just been observing them has been a true gift and something I enjoy to do in my free time.
Yeah. So I'd like to just ask you another question on that real quick. So you're no longer with the San Diego Combat Academy then?
That's correct.
Oh, okay. So you're now training on your own and being spending more time with your family. Yeah.
Yeah. Being mostly out of the arena MMA. One of my biggest trainer now is Charles Martinez. That's who I do most of my training with, and he's able to adapt not only my striking but my ground game. So it's all out of the arena, and then I do some other training as well with Justin Flores for wrestling and judo.
Oh, perfect. So we're going to see a more improved, enhanced version of you going ahead.
Yep.
I have to say, Les, it's been an absolutely delightful for me to have this conversation with you for this interview. And before we wrap this up, if you want to give a shout out to any sponsors or teammates, please go ahead. Okay,
great. Thank you. Yeah, I want to give a special shout out to Paige Yvette and especially to Enrique Marte. They've both been really pivotal in this fight and sacrificing their bodies continually to help me out. And then to all my coaches like Vince Salvador and Coach Martinez, who are continually trying to incorporate new parts of their game and evolution to also help ourselves as fighters. Perfect. Les, again, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day and having this interview. And I wish you the very best ahead for your fight. Thank you so much.
Make sure to subscribe to the LowKick MMA YouTube channel for all the latest news, event previews, and interviews with some of the biggest stars in MMA.